A bird explodes mid-song, a cat forgets how to breathe, and a squirrel drinks one energy drink and the entire universe stops turning. DreamWorks has spent nearly 30 years building the loudest, weirdest, most unforgettable screams in animation. But some are lazy, one is straight up borrowed, and exactly one is close to perfect. Let's count them down. Number 13. The Wilhelm Scream. We have to start here, because this is the scream DreamWorks didn't actually make. The Wilhelm is a stock sound effect. It first turned up in a 1951 Warner Brothers Western called Distant Drums, where the original session was labeled as a man getting bitten by an alligator, take 4. The voice behind it is usually credited to the actor and country singer Sheb Wooley. Ever since, sound editors have quietly slipped it into hundreds of movies as an inside joke. DreamWorks used it a lot. Fans have cataloged it in the Grand Central Station stampede in Madagascar, when the crowd charges up that marble staircase convinced Alex is hunting them. It shows up in Over the Hedge when a mosquito flies into a bug zapper, pitched so high you almost miss it. It's buried and flushed away as the slugs rain down on a crowd. Shrek the Third has 2 of them, one during a tavern brawl and one when Dragon flings a witch across the castle battlefield. Kung Fu Panda tucks one into Tai Lung's prison escape, right as he hurls a rhino guard. Monsters vs. Aliens uses it when B.O.B. spits out an alien clone. It's a lovely little tradition. It's also a rental. Every single scream above this one was built specifically for the film it lives in, and that is exactly why the Wilhelm sits at the bottom of the list. Number 12. The Bergen Banquet in Trolls. Trolls is built on a genuinely unhinged premise. The Bergens are enormous, permanently miserable creatures who believe the only way to feel happiness is to eat a troll. So the film has to sell terror while staying bright pink and covered in glitter. The screaming that comes out of that is fine. It's loud, it's panicked, and it does the job. The standout moment is Chef, voiced by Christine Baranski, serving Creek to young King Gristle inside a taco while Creek, voiced by Russell Brand, is still audibly screaming from inside it. That's a properly funny image. Being served alive in Mexican cuisine mid-sentence. The problem is interchangeability. Swap those screams into almost any other animated film and nothing changes. They're panic wallpaper. The design team clearly put enormous thought into the Bergens themselves. And there's a fun detail here, because the Bergens were partly inspired by early concept art originally developed for Shrek. All that visual invention, and the sound is generic terror. Anna Kendrick's Poppy does slightly better. She spends most of the film relentlessly cheerful, so when she does finally scream, the contrast means something. It just doesn't get enough room to breathe in a film moving this fast. Trolls proves that volume alone doesn't get you very far. The scream has to tell you something you didn't already know about the character screaming. Which brings us to a movie where it very nearly does. Number 11. Susan Murphy's Wedding Day in Monsters vs. Aliens. Susan, voiced by Reese Witherspoon, is minutes from marrying a local weatherman named Derek Deedle, played by Paul Rudd, when a meteorite lands directly on her, and the film's best joke arrives before the screaming even starts. Susan calmly tells her mother she thinks she just got hit by a meteorite, and her mother reassures her that every bride feels that way on her wedding day. Then Susan grows. She hits 49 feet and 11 inches, her hair turns white, and the church roof comes off. The scream itself is genuinely good work. Witherspoon plays it as confusion first, then horror, and you can hear a woman discovering her own body in real time. That's a hard note to land. The guests, though, are just a wall of noise. Everyone screams identically, so the moment ends up carrying less weight than it should. Worth knowing, this was the first DreamWorks feature produced entirely in stereoscopic 3D from the ground up rather than converted afterwards. Enormous technical leap. Slightly ordinary crowd panic. Number 10. Megamind gets thrown into the stratosphere. Megamind is one of the studio's sharpest scripts, and it has a scream that only works because of how the physics of the scene are staged. By this point, Megamind, voiced by Will Ferrell, has accidentally created a supervillain. He gave Metro Man's DNA to a cameraman named Hal Stewart, played by Jonah Hill, intending to build a hero called Titan. Hal misheard it as Titan, went straight to villainy, and is now considerably stronger than everyone else in Metro City. So when Titan grabs Megamind and throws him, Megamind doesn't fall. He goes up, all the way into the stratosphere. What makes this land is the Doppler effect. The scream doesn't cut off, it stretches and thins and drops in pitch as he gets further away, the way a siren changes as a fire truck passes. It's a real acoustic principle used for a joke. Then he dehydrates himself into a small blue cube on the way down and lands safely in a fountain, which is possibly the most elegant escape in the entire DreamWorks catalog. Great scream. Slightly wasted because the film barely pauses to let you enjoy it. Megamind is racing toward its ending at that point, and the gag gets maybe 2 seconds of air. A slower movie would have held on that shrinking blue dot for another beat and doubled the laugh. Number 9. Mrs. Tweety and Chicken Run. Chicken Run was the first collaboration between DreamWorks and Aardman Animations, directed by Peter Lord and Nick Park, and it remains the highest-grossing stop-motion film ever made. It is also tonally a prison escape thriller starring Poultry. Melisha Tweedy, voiced by Miranda Richardson, is one of animation's genuinely frightening villains, and the film gets enormous comic value out of denying her a scream. There's a brilliant early moment where the gravy pressure spikes and a jet of hot gravy hits her in the face. She yelps, and then immediately snaps back to being terrifying and calls her husband an idiot. The scream lasts about half a second before her contempt overrides it, then the finale pays it off. Mrs. Tweedy ends up stuck in the top of her own pie machine, legs kicking, shrieking, gravy rising underneath her. Her husband walks in, sees this, says nothing, and quietly closes the door and backs away. That's the joke. Her scream is so unfamiliar to everyone around her that the only reasonable response is to leave. Aardman's clay faces sell it perfectly, all bared teeth and popping eyes. Brilliantly written. Just not quite the loudest thing on this list. Number 8. Belt in the Croods. This one is on the list precisely because it isn't a scream. It's the strangest entry here and one of the funniest ideas DreamWorks has ever had. Belt is a small three-toed sloth who spends the entire film wrapped around Guy's waist, holding up his trousers. That's why he's called Belt. He is voiced by Chris Sanders, who also co-directed the film. Belt has no dialogue, not a single line. What he has instead is a three-note dramatic sting. Whenever anything ominous or exciting happens, Belt throws up his arms and goes dun dun dun, like a tiny living orchestra reacting to the plot in real time. It's a scream in function if not in form. It's the sound of alarm, delivered by a creature physically incapable of moving fast enough to escape anything, and once you notice it, you cannot stop hearing it. There's a related detail in the same film. Sandy, the feral crude baby, was voiced by sound designer Randy Tom using assembled creature noises rather than a child actor, which tells you how seriously this production took non-verbal sound. Remember Tom's name because he is coming back later, and much higher up. Number 7. The Screaming Slugs and Flushed Away. Flushed Away was the third and final DreamWorks and Aardman co-production, and its best running gag is a chorus of slugs who follow the plot around like commentary. The introduction is perfect. Roddy, voiced by Hugh Jackman, gets flushed into the sewer, meets a slug, and screams. The slug screams straight back at him at exactly the same pitch, then slithers off. Two creatures, equally horrified by each other, in perfect harmony. What makes this genuinely interesting is why there are so many of them. The slugs were originally written for a single scene. DreamWorks executives liked them enough that they were slotted in throughout the film, appearing whenever the pacing needed a lift. So a gag designed as a one-off became the movie's most quoted element. They sing, they whistle, they scream, and they close the film with a title card confirming that no slugs were assaulted during production. That's the ranking argument. Their screams are the sound of a film discovering what it's actually good at, halfway through making itself. Number 6. Po in Kung Fu Panda. Jack Black's Po is the most physically vocal character DreamWorks has ever produced. And the reason is that Black treats sound effects as the hardest part of the job. He has described asking to save all the effort sounds for the very end of a recording session, because he knows he is going to wreck his throat doing them. He described his approach as going 1000% and only having one gear. He also said he gets physical in the booth, actually throwing the movements, because the sounds don't come out right if you stand still and pretend. You can hear that everywhere in this franchise. Po falling, Po hitting things, Po being launched by a firework chair, Po attempting the staircase to the Jade Palace and losing. Those aren't clean library screams. They're breath-forward, ragged, slightly wet, and they wobble in the middle because a real person was genuinely out of breath. That's the ranking case. Most animated screams are performed. Pos are earned. There's a difference between an actor doing a scream and an actor doing an exertion, and Black is one of the very few people who consistently delivers the second thing. Number 5. The Dragons in How to Train Your Dragon. This is the most technically impressive entry on the list, and it belongs to a sound designer rather than an actor. Randy Tom, a two-time Academy Award winner working out of Skywalker Sound, built the dragon vocals for this franchise. Toothless has no dialogue at all, which means every single emotional beat has to arrive through sound design. Thom's palette for Toothless combined animal recordings with his own voice. Horses, elephants, tigers, and whale sounds all fed into it. That's why Toothless can shift from terrifying to affectionate to comic without ever sounding like a different creature. The genuinely clever part happened earlier in production. Tom's team asked the animators to design the dragons so their whole bodies moved when they vocalized, not just their mouths. A creature that only opens and closes its jaw severely limits what sound you can put there. A creature that ripples and flexes gives you room to build something complex. So when Toothless screams, the screech, the growl, and the plasma blast all feel like they're coming from one body. Directors would even ask for specific human inflections, requesting that a vocalization feel more like an O or a what. That's not a sound effect. That's a language. Number 4. Hammy in Over the Hedge. Here is the single best subversion of a scream in the DreamWorks catalog, and it works by taking the scream away. Hammy, voiced by Steve Carell, is a hyperactive red squirrel. He is already the loudest thing in the film. Early on, RJ the raccoon, voiced by Bruce Willis, physically stops him from drinking a caffeinated energy drink on the entirely reasonable grounds that caffeine is the last thing this animal needs. Then the finale traps everyone in the hedge between a bear, a homeowner, and an exterminator. RJ hands Hammy the can. Every viewer in the cinema braces. You know exactly what's coming. Hammy guzzles it, his body starts convulsing, the scream builds, and the audience prepares for the loudest 30 seconds of the year. And the film cuts to silence. The world stops turning. Hammy strolls calmly through frozen time, rearranging the entire climax around him. It's such a good idea that it traveled. The director of the 2020 Sonic the Hedgehog film has cited this specific sequence as an inspiration for that movie's slow-motion set pieces. A scream so effective that it works by not arriving. Number 3. Fiona's high note in Shrek. Shrek won the first ever Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, and this 15-second gag explains the entire film. Fiona, voiced by Cameron Diaz with singing supplied by Sally Dworsky, wanders into a forest clearing and does the thing every animated princess does. She sings with a bluebird. The bird matches her. She climbs higher. The bird strains. She climbs higher still, and the bird inflates and detonates. Fiona pauses, looks slightly guilty, then calmly fries its eggs for breakfast. The genius is what the scream actually is. Fiona isn't screaming. The note is beautiful right up to the moment it becomes lethal. The film takes the single most reliable image in fairy tale animation and follows it to its logical conclusion, which is a small animal being killed by soprano. That's the whole mission statement. Shrek was built to take beloved things seriously enough to break them, and this is the exact moment the audience understood the assignment. There's a fun companion detail. Fiona's burp later in the film wasn't scripted. Diaz genuinely burped in the booth after drinking a Coke, and the team liked it enough to animate around it. Number 2. The 10th Plague in The Prince of Egypt. This is the scream that has nothing funny about it whatsoever, and it might be the most technically ambitious sound sequence DreamWorks has ever attempted. The Prince of Egypt was the studio's first traditionally animated feature, directed by Brenda Chapman, Steve Hickner and Simon Wells, with songs by Steven Schwartz and a score by Hans Zimmer. The sound team worked on it for up to 3 years, handling a chariot race, a sandstorm, 10 plagues, and the parting of the Red Sea, a 4-minute sequence that took 10 animators 2 years to finish. Then comes the final plague, and the film does something almost no family movie would attempt. It goes quiet, the angel of death moves through Egypt in near silence, and afterwards the wailing rises from the city, from streets you cannot see, from families the film never introduced. There is no single character screaming. It's a sound with no owner. The choice to withhold identity is what makes it land. You cannot look away from a specific grieving face, because there isn't one. You just hear a city. Even the film's approach to God's voice followed this logic. The cast were recorded whispering the lines together so nobody would dominate, with Val Kilmer layered louder on top. Sound as texture rather than performance. Remarkable filmmaking,